Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Wednesday, October 2nd, and it's time for our weekly check-in with Baylor Director of Sports Journalism, Jerry Hill. These weekly segments with Jerry are to catch up on all things Baylor sports, everything that's going on. And right now that includes football, volleyball, and soccer. And man, Jerry, a lot to get into about the last week of all athletics, but I wanted to start with probably the most impressive week for any of the athletic teams, and it's the volleyball team. We mentioned last week they went into that two contests against Arizona State. If they could win those, sitting in really good position for the rest of the year, and they did. They actually won both of those games, Wednesday over Arizona, and then Friday night over number 14 Arizona State. Took both of those matches 3-1, and that was it. I mean, not that it wasn't close. Like you can always have competitive matches, but the fact that they got both of those wins the way they did was pretty impressive. So it sets up well for the next few matches. But what are your thoughts on those matches last week to kick off Big 12 play?
Yeah, Colt, they were kind of carbon copies. I mean, Baylor came out really strong, really in both of those, kind of dominated in the first set, held on in the second set, dropped the third set, and then, kind of took care of business in the fourth. And that's big because you don't ever want to go to that fifth, and because then it's like anybody's game, and a miss hit here and there, and you lose the match. So I think the fact that they were able to take care of both of those in four, and particularly Arizona State, that's a ranked team. That's an NCAA tournament team, so you beat them, and like you said, getting off to a 2-0 start. I think that's going to be key in the Big 12 in volleyball. Is you've got to win your home matches. To have a chance, particularly to win a conference championship, you've got to win your home matches. And they did that. They took care of business. They're off to a 2-0 start, and, couldn't have asked for a whole lot more.
Yeah, so to make the win over Arizona State more important, Arizona State had just swept number 22 TCU in Fort Worth, so kind of their Texas tour through those first two matches, and Baylor was able to get the win. So I know there was some discussion of Arizona State's travel and how that could impact them, but at that point it's just kind of home court advantage. Like you can't really, Baylor's going to be in situations like that in the future. All teams are going to be in situations like that, and so it was really impressive. And now that leads to a match with TCU, who is number 22 in the last polls. I don't know if is that the most recent polls where they were number 22, but another top 25 opponent nonetheless. They travel to Fort Worth to face the Horned Frogs. But what is your outlook on that particular match? And I mean, you talk about it's kind of house money at that point because it's going to be a tough match. But if you can win that and go to 3-0 with another top 25 victory, I mean, Baylor's number 14, and that could boost them even higher pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was good to see them move up as much as they did because, I think that shows you how significant that win over Arizona State was to move up, to number 14 in the poll. That was huge. And yeah, I think you are kind of playing with house money, facing TCU. But I think the fact that you've had, that bye, you've had some rest before you go into this one, because, they were, getting to that point where they were banged up a little bit, had, some players in and out of the lineup. So I think that was good to kind of have some downtime. And certainly this was, more fuel to the fire in this rivalry was, Jason Williams was an assistant here, under Coach McGuire and went up to Fort Worth, and he's actually done really well against Ryan. Ryan has actually struggled against both him and Sam Erger, who's at SMU. So the assistants, that it's kind of the anti-Nick Saban deal. Nick just kind of owned his assistants, but Ryan has struggled against some of his. So I think there's some motivation, in that Sunday match with TCU. A team that I think TCU swept them, won both matches, I guess I should say, last year. So I think there's definitely some motivation to kind of get back at them and again, continue on this road. Because I think, winning those first two puts you, in good shape to go, let's go try to win a conference championship now.
Yeah, there's a few other undefeated teams after that first week of conference play, but it sets up well. And so Baylor will travel to Fort Worth to face number 22 TCU Sunday. So they don't have a midweek game this week. Right. And that game will be at 2 p.m. Central Time and actually be on ESPN. So if you want to tune in, it'll be easy to get to it and turn it on. And if you haven't watched volleyball before, I mean, it's a blast to watch. Like, even if you don't really understand everything that's all the moving pieces, it's a blast to watch. Extremely athletic. You kind of wonder if some of those girls could play basketball as well, as athletic as they are. So make sure to tune in. And obviously Baylor has had a lot of success. And now I want to make the shift to soccer now. Last week, I mean, you have two more ranked matches. This team has faced a lot of tough teams this year. And then you throw in Colorado and TCU going to Boulder and then playing TCU at home, and you leave with ties. And that, if you're not a soccer fan, it might not be a big deal, but like you were telling me just a minute ago, like those are valuable, especially when you're the underdog. So now Baylor's 1-1-2 in league play. What did those two particular games tell us about this soccer team and what it could provide, or what information it does provide for the rest of the season?
Yeah, and I think they're actually 1-2-2 because they started out with the two 1-0 losses. So they're 1-2-2. And yeah, the way the conference standings work for soccer is you get 3 points for a win and 1 point for a tie. They used to have a deal. I think it was, you would get a point if you went into overtime. Of course, now they don't have that, particularly in regular season. They don't have the you don't go into overtime now. So, but yeah, you get 1 point for a tie. And so that was what was big about really both of those, particularly Colorado on the road. I mean, that's huge to be able to leave there. That's a tough trip, to go up there to Boulder and to play a really good team. And granted, your one goal was an own goal, for Colorado. So I thought that was big getting that one. And I'm not going to say it was house money coming back, but that was just big to get that tie. And then to come here against TCU, man, TCU was definitely the aggressor. They were, they had like 28 shots to 6, 8 shots on goal to 2. But Baylor, made the most of its opportunities, with a great header by Hannah Augustin. And just, that was an unbelievable goal because she had a header off the top woodwork, and then the deflection came right back to her, and she headed it in. The goalkeeper had gone for that first one, and she was actually down. And so then all Hannah had to do was just out jump the defender, and she was able to knock that one in. And then TCU was able to get the equalizer, I believe, in like the 73rd, 74th minute. And Baylor held on. I mean, again, they were facing shots all day long. I'll give all the credit to Azul Alvarez, who transferred from TCU. So I'm sure there was some emotion and motivation in this match for her. She literally took one off the face. It was a 1v1 play. The TCU girl was like kind of right out in front of the goal and had kind of pretty much a free lane. And she took the shot, and it bounced off Azul's face, and you could see her like just bounce back like she had been shot or something. But then, the defense was able to knock it out of there. But man, it was a really good match. Obviously Baylor would have liked to, come away with 3 points, particularly facing that TCU team. But again, you faced two ranked teams, one on the road, and came out of there with, a total of 2 points for the week. And you're right there kind of in the middle of the standings and with, a chance to move up. There's a lot of winnable games left in conference play. Their RPIs in the 30s. So really what they need to do, Colt, the rest of the way is just kind of take care of business.
Yeah, so that they did when they faced Houston with that 4-0 win. And I was looking back, and I saw the Texas State tie in there and didn't get back up to Oklahoma State. So you're right, 1-2-2 losses to Oklahoma State and Arizona, but then a win over Houston and now 2 ties. So they do come up, and they will be facing Texas Tech on Friday. And I know that Texas Tech's had an impressive win over Oklahoma State, and it will be a challenge, obviously, being in Lubbock. So how big is that win or potential game moving forward on Friday?
Yeah, and I think, again, anytime you face a ranked team like that, you're hoping to just kind of go in there and, kind of go toe-to-toe with them. I guess that's appropriate for soccer. Yeah. Go head-to-head with them and really kind of be in it toward the end. You'd like to get more shots than they did against TCU. TCU's a real possession team. So, maybe some of the same thing against Texas Tech, but you just got to make the most of your opportunities. I think they'll try to create more opportunities this time against Tech. And like you said, going on the road, going to Lubbock, that's a tough trip. But yeah, if they could come out with a win, because Tech's not only ranked, but they're up there in the top, shared for the lead in the conference standings. So that would be a huge win. And again, you get 3 points for a win, 1 point for a tie. So 3 points there. I mean, that would be huge in terms of particularly getting into the Big 12 tournament, but then really helping your chances for an NCAA tournament bid.
Yeah, absolutely. So that game is on Friday, October 4th, and it will start at 7 p.m. Central Time. Really good, solid week from those two programs. I mean, we didn't really know what to expect going into it. You kind of had hopes that the volleyball team would play well. Soccer being able to do what they did and tie those games, especially for a program that was continually trying to build. I mean, that's the MO for this season. Just keep building, keep grinding, keep plugging away, and putting themselves in good positions for the rest of the season. And now, we got to shift to football. And I know we're going to it feels like we do this the last couple of seasons. It's just man, it's just another difficult loss and in a variety of new way to lose this particular game against BYU. And it was a game that Baylor was favored in. BYU's the ranked team, but Baylor was favored in terms of what Vegas thought. Roughly 3 points, and a slow start, getting down 21-0 was ultimately what put this one away.
Yeah.
They had their chances to win it at the end. Don't think otherwise. But when you get down that quick, that early in the game, it was 14-0 before the 8-minute mark in the first quarter. Is a lot like the Utah game, and they just couldn't recover from it. And I do think there's positives to pull from it, but my biggest concern now is just mentally for this team of how do they rebound from another just tough loss. And do you think this team has the mental ability to rebound, especially going to Ames, where it's going to be another tough environment against another ranked team?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I know Coach Aranda talked about at the Monday media presser. He talked about how some of the players, had stood up, before the rest of the team, and really kind of being leaders. And let's move on, that kind of thing. So let's see. I do think there was some little bit of hangover from Colorado to get off to that kind of start, because particularly defensively, I don't know that even against Utah, I don't know that Utah had such an easy time. I guess maybe at the start they did, but man, BYU is not near that explosive, and they made it look explosive the way they got out to a 21-0 lead. But like you said, I think there are some positives from that. Certainly, you were able to fight your way back in and actually had a couple of chances there late in the game to win this. I honestly thought, when Linus Noel got the interception there right at midfield, you get the ball back at their 45 with about 4 minutes to go. I'm thinking, Baylor's going to pull this off. That was kind of my thought there. But, weren't able to do that. But credit to the defense. They got the ball back again, but then had the interception. I felt like they were kind of pressing on those last couple of offensive series. Like they had done a really good job getting back into it, kind of taking what the defense gave you. And I felt like like that last pass in particular, you're forcing things where, the holding penalty hurt, pushed you back, or maybe it was the intentional grounding. But anyway, pushed you back, and you weren't able to recover, and then through the pick. But again, you had a couple of chances there late, and in some ways, it wasn't anything like Colorado, but you leave kind of with the same feeling, because it's one that you felt like you could win and maybe even should have won there at the end, and just weren't able to make plays at the end. So this is a team that has struggled particularly to start. But if you look at the last couple of weeks, it's finishing. That's what you need to get. So I think this team needs to figure out a way, and we're 5 games into it now. This team needs to figure out a way to play 4 quarters. They have not done that. Even in the wins, I don't think that they've ever played 4 full quarters. So it would be nice to see them put that together, and it may take that, Colt, don't you think, against an Iowa State team that's really played well. Again, not the most explosive team. They're just kind of more that grind it out, and that's what they did against Houston. It was 3-0, I think, late in the third quarter, and then they wound up scoring 17, there late. But so I think you've got to put 4 quarters together to have a chance against a very good Iowa State team on the road.
Yeah, Iowa State's currently favored by like 11.5 points, and that's actually down from where it opened. So it kind of tells you the potential for this game, defensive battle. And Baylor will get a lot of guys back, or should get a lot of guys back on defense that missed the BYU game, which was, in the grand scheme, it was kind of overlooked, but not really. Like, it was a lot of discussion about it. But when you're missing 6 or 7 guys from your defense, that can explain a lot of that slow start. And one thing I wanted to talk about, and you don't want to play, and it's nothing I've even really thought about, but you don't want to play Monday morning quarterback. But Baylor not kicking or not being able to even get a field goal off in that fourth quarter when they don't know if they're going to get the ball back. Like, we got to try to score here. It could have made that game much more interesting. Hey, we're down 6 and 2 field goals will tie this up. But ultimately, it was just like what they were doing the entire game. Even in the first quarter, before they got their first score, they moved the ball pretty well besides the interception. Then in the fourth quarter, it just kind of shut down. And I think that's just the nature of, you have not a new defensive scheme, but a kind of a new defensive outlook. But then also offensively, it's a complete new scheme. So they're still growing into their shoes in a lot of ways. And I don't know where this team ultimately ends up offensively, but I think you have to be encouraged with Sawyer Robertson going against a BYU defense who hadn't allowed a passing touchdown all season. He gets 3 of them. Both of his interceptions were kind of, the tip ball wasn't really his fault. I mean, it was to an extent, but that's just a great play by the defense. And then, as you mentioned, forcing the ball down the field, trying to make a play at the end of the game as time was running out. I think there's still some positives to take from that, but I think it goes back to the running game. Sawyer can't be the only guy trying to run the football. How do they get that going? And not that you have the answers, because I think if you had them, you have already gone to coach. But how do they get it going without having to rely on Sawyer's legs so much?
Yeah, I think it starts up front, Colt. I mean, and Coach talked about the running backs not, running as hard as they had in the past. So I think there's some on the running backs as well. But man, if the holes aren't there, then it doesn't really matter. So I think it's got to start up front. You were missing one of your offensive linemen in this game. Campbell Barrington was out. I think he's supposed to be back, so that will help. What they wound up doing is flopping Caden Siraki over at the right side, where him and Abasale had been kind of rotating at left tackle. So again, that hurts your depth too. Losing a guy that you could rotate in there with Abasale. So I think that affected you. But yeah, I think that's where it's got to start, Colt, is that up front. They've got to win some of those battles and create some holes. I think this is a team that can run the ball. I mean, you look at that running back room and there's guys there. There's talent there. So I think you just got to get it going on up front. I don't know if the answers are there or not, but, I think that's where it's got to start, is up front.
Yeah, and you want Sawyer to run the football in opportune times, but he can't be the guy that's carrying the load. And I mean, through the Colorado game and then the BYU game, he was the guy getting in the end zone in the running game standpoint, and he was basically carrying the team in terms of yardage too, even with sacks involved, 3 sacks against BYU. But I will say too, like, you face BYU, you face Utah. I would say Colorado's defense is probably better than we anticipated to begin the season. Right. And so I'm curious. Iowa State's not going to be that's not the game to get right there. That's not the game that's going to make things easy. But the way the back end of the schedule is setting up, it does lighten up a little bit in terms of run defense, physicality. Baylor's just kind of got that. I mean, I don't know. I think the schedules in a lot of ways has flipped from what we thought at the beginning of the season. Now the back half looks a little bit lighter. You talk about Kansas that has struggled. Texas Tech defensively has not been as good as they were a year ago. And there's some games there that hopefully they can get that run game going. Now defensively, I mean, we talked about the injuries and the suspensions that were addressed by the Waco Trib. Zach Smith addressed those. But, I mean, getting guys like Lorando Johnson hopefully back after going out early. Chateau Reed, I don't really know his status. It wasn't addressed, but Steve Linton was suspended, and Garmin Randolph out. I mean, that at your edge positions, outside linebacker, that's your top 2. Jaquez Evans did not play in this game. That's your 3 edge outside linebackers. And then your cornerbacks, basically your top 3 guys with Caden Jenkins out as well. I mean, that you got to get at least one of those guys back. And it sounds like they'll get two on the outside linebacker position and potentially one, hopefully with Lorando coming back. But I mean, going in this game on the road, you want to be all hands on deck. And I think that's going to solidify the overall potential for this defense, because what we saw in the first half against BYU is not what they've shown this entire season.
Yeah, you mentioned the edge rushers and that, look at the stats. You get 8 sacks against Colorado. You get 0 against BYU. And if I had to guess, I'm guessing Shedeur Sanders is a little bit more elusive than Jake Retzlaff. So I think that was a big part of that game, is not having those guys. And I know, Coach Aranda's response was next man up. And I think eventually, as you got into the game, those guys did better as you went along. And as Dave said too, I mean, early on, some of the reads were, that were being made wrongly were guys that are experienced. So I'm guessing he might have been talking about like Matt Jones and Keaton Thomas, guys that have been in there that were making the actual mistakes. So, I think some of the guys that came in did well, but you weren't able to get any kind of pass rush. So that just affected everything really. And that certainly played a part in them getting off to the start that they did. But, again, you look and Baylor only gave up 3 points in the second half, and I believe it was 81 yards total offense in that second half. So you saw signs that they're getting better, but I think it will be a huge help, Colt, to get at least some of those guys back. We know that Steve is back. We know that Garmin Randolph was at least practicing with the guys on Monday. So, I think you get some of those guys back, and, hopefully Chateau and Caden, if they're not back this week, maybe they're back next week. So, just getting some of those pieces back, because I think as good a depth as you have on defense, you don't have enough to sustain that many losses, I don't think. Not right now anyway.
Yeah, I mean, Kyler Jordan played, I don't know how many snaps he ended up playing in that game, but he was essentially at that juncture your fourth outside linebacker, and he played a lot of the game. You had Reggie Bush and LeVar Thornton, who hadn't played. They both played season highs, at least in season highs, maybe career highs in snaps at cornerback. And I mean, that's a challenge. And they did settle in well. And I would say that the entire defense did. And I don't know if there's an overcompensation knowing, oh, man, we got all these guys out by Matt Jones and Keaton Thomas. We have to go make plays. And they were playing out of their element a little bit, because you hadn't seen that from Matt Jones. And he did struggle a little bit in that game in terms of missed tackles. But when you don't have edge protection from guys like Steve Linton and Garmin Randolph against the run, much less pass rush, it makes it a challenge. So ultimately, what are your keys for this game against Iowa State? I mean, you want to go in and get a win, obviously, but just to keep this game close and competitive and grow. And you don't want to move to 2-4, because then the challenge to get away from 2-4 into bowl eligibility is even that much harder. But they just have to be competitive first and foremost, see if they even want to consider getting a win in this game.
Yeah, and I think a big deal, particularly when you're playing a team like Iowa State, is get off the field when you get a chance. If you get Iowa State and in third and long, say, you can't give up that play. You got to get them off the field. You got to get your defense off the field. And I would say in the reverse, on the offensive side, be patient. They're not going to give you. They're probably not going to get beat deep. They're going to keep things in front of them. And so take what they give you, just kind of be patient. You may have to stretch together some long drives where you just got to hold on to the ball, move the chains. I think that's going to be the key, Colt, is you can't get impatient on offense and try to force things maybe the way that you did late in the game against BYU. Just be patient, move the chains, and get points on the board. That'll be key. When you have chances like that, and you may not have a ton against Iowa State, get points on the board, no matter how that is.
Yeah, Iowa State will definitely shorten this game as much as they can. They've done it all season. They've done it every year under Matt Campbell. It just seems like, well, they're not that strong of an offense. And then you get to play them, you realize what their full intent is, just one, to keep the ball away from you, make you take up a lot of time to go and score. And truthfully, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like a triple option team. They're just going to try to play keep away. And then when you do score, it's going to be difficult to score. It's because it's going to take a long time. So it should be a fascinating game. All right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thanks to each of you for listening. For Jerry Hill, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Wednesday, and sick 'em Bears.
Sick 'em Bears.